I've had a podcast for a little bit now, about 2.5 years. You're coming onto the scene new, kind of stepping on to my turf a little bit.
Yeah.
So I got to ask, what the fuck?
Hello.
Sydney, what's up?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
This is fun.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe it's taken this long to get you on the podcast.
Right? Only a few years. It's fine.
Only a few years. It's fine. It's fine. I was trying to think, when was the last time we actually saw each other?
I think literally quarantine.
Probably that's
when we lived together.
Yeah, that when we were roommates.
When we were roommates.
Yeah, when we were roommates. R.I.P. Vine.
And they were roommates.
Oh my God, they were roommates.
R.I.P. R.I.P.
Gotta set one up for that. But yeah, that's what I came up with. I'm like, wow, that feels like so. I mean, it feels long ago. It's not, but it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just weird. Like, so many things are different in the world, or situate, like everything. It seems like a past life almost.
Yeah, it's like a fever dream. I was actually thinking about that before we hopped on, like same exact thing. I'm like, I don't think I've seen Joe since like literally quarantine, and that feels like 10 years ago. Like I feel like I've aged 10 years since then.
I agree. So many things are just, I guess, different is just the word. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Joe Vore Podcast, Way She Goes Podcast Network. Do not forget to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss an episode. Episodes out every single Monday. Now, let's get to our guest of honor. We are here with good friend, owner of Radiate Social. She's running all the marketing campaigns for the businesses and the influencers out there. She's a YouTube sensation and now the host of the Elevate Your Dream State podcast. Episodes out now, Apple, Spotify, Google, also going to be linked below. Syd Joz, what's up?
What an intro. Wow.
Thank
I love
you.
that.
I had to rehearse it a lot. I'm like, I can't screw it up.
Can't fuck it up.
I know. What I was most happy about, though, when I was going to try to pronounce your full name, but when you introduced yourself on the podcast as just Syd Joz, I'm like, okay, Syd Joz, that's it.
You're like, yes, easy peasy. Yeah.
Like, you did a great service to me there. I would have fumbled that intro so badly if I had to do the full name. So, but thank you for that. Okay, so now that I built you up, I got to tear you down a little tough love for a second. So my first thing, as we've mentioned, I've had a podcast for a little bit now, about 2.5 years. You're coming onto the scene new, kind of stepping on to my turf a little bit.
Yeah.
So I got to ask, what the fuck?
What do you mean?
No, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna be passive aggressive, like, yeah, sure, fine, get a pie. Yeah, anyone can do it, right?
I gotta see what it's all about, gotta see what you've been doing these past few years. I'm like, I want a little piece of it,
That's right. Yeah, this is like a it seems like a couple friends checking up, but secretly we're taking notes, trying to get better, tear each other down.
Exactly that, and we're recording it while we're doing it.
That's right. Yeah, to put it out there for everybody. I love it. I love it. So before we get into the podcast and other stuff, I kind of want to start with your YouTube, because that's kind of how you got started with content and everything, and just kind of your creativity in general. I love your YouTube channel. You haven't uploaded in a while, and then I looked and you kind of talked about it on your podcast. The earliest video I saw, it looked like you said like around the time you graduated high school, like June 2015 area. And everyone should go check it out, because there's great, like everything from like clothing try on hauls to like ASU frat party vlogs, which is just, I mean, I tell you what, the variety on the channel is, I mean,
we love some content diversity, keeping it real.
100%. So I love that. So when, like, just your creativity in general, like what do you feel like was inside you at that time when when you're 17, 18 years old, or maybe you haven't had it before that, you just didn't act on the urge until then when you finally put out a video and content? Like, what do you feel like what was in you that was just like, okay, I can't take it anymore. I just have to like this. I'm going to do this. I don't know what it is, but there's just something in me. I want to get it out and be creative.
Yeah. So I feel like I've always been very creative, like growing up and everything. My mom told me I was like literally picking up crayons before I could walk and coloring and doing all that stuff. And so I knew I like bought myself a Canon Rebel T3i when I was like 14, I think. And
Yeah.
I like such an expensive camera. Don't know why my parents let me do that. And I would just take pictures of like random things. And then eventually I was like, I want to be a YouTuber. Like that's when YouTubers were like starting to come up, like the
Yeah.
early days of YouTube, you know?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I was like, I want to be a YouTuber. So I like dabbled making those really cringy videos that like you'd make with your friends at like sleepovers and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And then that was just like for fun. And then I actually took it seriously once I graduated high school. Because I feel like I had this pull to just share my life. I feel like I am very personable and good in front of the camera. And I was like, I just want everybody to know what I'm up to all the time. I love attention. I'm a Leo. I'm an attention whore. So I'm like, why
Classic
not?
Leo.
Yeah, you know, why not be out there on the internet in front of the world? So yeah, and that pull inside me has like never left. Kind of like how I talked about in my one podcast episode. I'm not so much on YouTube anymore, but I still have this like creative drive inside of me, which is where I'm putting it all in with podcasting now. So yeah.
Yeah, let's kind of talk about that for a sec, because I just did an episode with Jenna Arend. I don't know if you know her, but she went to ASU. No, actually, she's still in. She's going to be graduating, but she has a huge following, Instagram, YouTube. She was on in the early days and did a ton of stuff on YouTube with her own channel, and then another channel. Has a super interesting story. But she's kind of transitioned. She doesn't have a podcast, but I think you kind of talk about this. Like she's transitioned more. She hasn't uploaded on YouTube for forever. And she's more taking TikTok seriously now, like the more, you know, shorter form content. You know, I feel like that's what a lot of people are doing. Like TikTok's kind of the new trend and podcasting, and you kind of transition the same way. So was it more of a burnout from YouTube, or are you just like, or do you just feel like you fit more, like you like kind of how TikTok and the whole podcast world is set up more? Do you feel like that fits you more? Maybe just when you started, YouTube was kind of the only thing out there, or the main thing out there?
Yeah, kind of. Definitely there is an aspect of burnout, you know, having the pressure to post these like really curated videos every single week, videos being like anywhere from 8 to 15 minutes long. Like that's a lot. And
Yeah.
so I was getting really burnt out over it. I was, you know, falling short on ideas. And then we were in quarantine and I'm like, what do I even vlog about? I'm sitting at home all day.
Yeah.
And losing that creative spark and just the passion for it in general. And then, yeah, then TikTok came around. It's a lot more organic. Like, no matter how organic a vlog can seem like on YouTube, I mean, you know, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes, so much editing and everything.
Oh yeah.
Not saying it's not authentic, but it's not as organic as TikTok is, where you just literally like pick up your phone, start recording, and
Yeah.
people eat that shit up, you know? So yeah, and then also with podcasting, I feel like I just wanted more of that longer format talking style, like
Yes.
not just visuals, but just straight up talking and value and just that.
I love it. I love it. So let's kind of go into the podcast now. I'm a fan, by the way. I've listened to the first 2 episodes. I'm really enjoying it. It's like you're hanging out with me in my ears, which I've been enjoying. So elevate your dream state, like we mentioned, lifestyle podcast. Now, here's something. I know you talked about, you did a podcast before. It was you and a friend. You're riding solo on this one, which isn't easy to do. You know, people are like, oh, it's 20, 25 minutes, whatever. No, it's tough to talk and not sound like you're rambling and get lost when it's just you. Like I just do this show, but at least I have guests on to interview people and we can play off each other and have to be able to talk. So when you were kind of in your head picturing and organizing and building this podcast before you started it, like did you ever think, oh, I need to find a co-host, I'm going to interview people, or was it always, I kind of want to do this on my own and I'm kind of going to ride solo with this? Like, what was kind of your lead up before you finally hit record and put out an episode?
Yeah, so before, or I guess a little after my friend and I finished up our podcast that we had together, I kind of realized, I was like, okay, I think I'm more of a solo act kind of gal. Like, yes, it is very hard. For every single episode, I have so much prep and notes.
Yeah.
So I don't go on and ramble because no one's there to be like, yo, like, you've been on the same topic for 5 minutes, except for me.
Yeah, right.
And so, yeah, once we had our podcast and then mutually decided to end it, then I was kind of like, okay, I don't think the whole co-host style really suits me. I do want to have guests eventually once I build up more of a foundation with
Yep.
Elevate Your Dream State. But for now, it's just going to be solo, and then eventually solo episodes sprinkled in with some guests as well.
I love it. Now
Yeah.
I want to talk, or before we kind of move into the next thing, I know you said you've done a ton of prep, but just kind of your experience so far. I mean, it can be anything from like the technical side, how did you research like what equipment to get? Because it does sound very good. Like your quality is very good on the audio end for sure, of course. But kind of what's been your experience so far, the challenges, whether it's been, just coming up with stuff, the prep for it, the, technical, like equipment side, like kind of what has been your experience with the podcast so far?
So at the very beginning, I just go hard or go home.
Yep.
So when my friend and I decided to create our podcast last year, I was like, we're going to get the best equipment right away. It's going to be so worth it. And so I still have that equipment because I did all the editing and everything from that. So that was kind of nice to transition over. But with Elevate Your Dream State, I did a lot more research into more of like what the equipment I bought can do.
Yeah.
I didn't like go too far in depth. I just kind of like scratched the surface, and we were very just winging it. So I put a lot more research, watching a ton of YouTube videos, learning how to use GarageBand on like Apple products to edit and everything, because I was using iMovie and then exporting it. Yeah. And then exporting it as like an MP3 file instead of MP4. And now looking back, I'm like, how did I do that for like how many months? Like with our old podcast, I'm like, that's ridiculous. So I actually took a lot more time to sit and prepare and learn more about the tech and everything. But yeah, the equipment I use is the Rodecaster and the Rode pod mic, and that stuff is like crispy. I love it.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how I've bit my tongue this far into the podcast, even though it's probably only been 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Journaling. I am a mega slut. Like, I'm talking like walking through the hallway in high school, like that's the girl who fucked the whole football team level of slut for journaling. You were talking about this in a podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta calm down here. I gotta turn the AC on. I'm freaking out.
Hot and bothered.
Oh, I was hot and bothered. I gotta I gotta take my, like, what I was freaking out. I love journaling. Now, I want to take a second here, share my experience with journaling. I want to hear your thoughts on it, and then I want you to go in to your side of journaling too, because I feel we both journal, but I feel like we journal for different things, and yours is something different. I really haven't had a voice or perspective like that, because I know you're very spiritual with all your stuff, and that necessarily I haven't had a ton of that on here. So I think it'd be cool and interesting to have something different.
Yeah.
So when I journal, first off, I kind of started doing it. I was listening to Matthew McConaughey when he was going on his press junket tour for his book and his memoir. And he talked about how when he was a kid, he started journaling and writing things down. Now, I wasn't thinking like, oh, hopefully I'll be cool one day like Matthew McConaughey and people will give shit enough for me to, listen to all my journal entries. But he talked about one thing that really stuck with me from the interviews. Like, I wanted to be able to write stuff down so that when things weren't going so well, I could look back at when things were going well, how my relationships were, what I was doing, eating, how, when I don't have as much money in my pocket, let's go back, let's be able to look back on a time when things were going well. And I was like, man, that would help so much, because all of our lives are kind of a roller coaster.
Oh, yeah.
We get inside of our heads. We have good days, bad days, good weeks, bad weeks. We all deal with that. So I was like, that would be really cool to do. And I was kind of sporadic with it or whatever. This was kind of last fall, but 2022 started and I really, really committed to it. So I have 2 journals because my grandma got me a journal for Christmas. Shout out grandma. She doesn't know what a
Shout out
podcast
grandma.
is, but she's not listening. She has no idea. She may have forgotten about me. Who knows? But so I got a journal that I like. It's kind of technical. Like I track all of like my social media post stuff. So when stuff goes well, I can look back and, figure out how to maybe repeat that. Right. So I do that a little bit in there. I do a little bit like what shows I'm watching. I know you're a Euphoria. Everyone's a Euphoria person.
Yeah.
So I write down in there what I'm watching for the week. Like, okay, Euphoria, Righteous Gemstones. I watch this movie, blah, 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 Sex and the City. All that stuff. What's going on with Mr. Big. I'm super locked in right now. And then the journal my grandma got me, I'm like, how am I going to use this? I still got so many pages in this other one. So I started a fitness and like mental health journal, which has been super helpful. I always was kind of against it because I was like, oh, I don't need to do this. I've always kind of known what to do for fitness to kind of reach the goals that I wanted to, but it's such a marathon and it's so hard to stay disciplined for that long. I'm like, well, I'm just going to start a journal, write down all my workouts, what I'm eating, any vitamins, any of that stuff, how I'm feeling, what my sleep is like. When I have a bad week, I can probably be able to go back and look, oh, I didn't really sleep that well this week, because that's a big factor.
Yeah.
And then I created this table. I'm going to sound like a first grade teacher here, but when I hit my numbers for the day, I give myself a little smiley face for that day. And if I don't, I give myself a frowny face. It's the stupidest thing ever. But when I get inside my own head and I'm like, oh, I want Ben and Jerry's or a pizza so bad. I'm like, you know what? Fuck that. I'm no frowny face. No, I don't want to see, I don't want to have to write down a frowny face. And you know what? It works for me. So and I think the biggest thing is like, I want to create stuff that isn't a phase. I want to be able to do something that is a lifestyle, is part of your life that you can, I don't want something, I'm like, okay, this will be good for a few months. I want this to be good. I want this to be something that I just do. So that's been kind of my experience and what I journal for. So I kind of want to like open this up to you, how do you feel about that? And then also I want you to go into what you journal about, why you do it, and kind of just really your why.
Yeah. First off, I love that. Those are such great intentional journals to have. And the way that you hold yourself accountable with your little frowny face, smiley face system.
Got to.
If it works, it works.
Yes.
So the way I journal, kind of like how you said, it has more of the spiritual, like personal growth aspect to it. And really, journaling doesn't have to always be super spiritual. I feel like it's become kind of like a buzzword kind of thing, especially on TikTok and everything. It's a lot of like spiritual people talking about journaling. Anybody can journal. Literally anyone can journal. Yeah. And the format of it that is taken so spiritually is it's more gratitude based and it's more shadow work based. So shadow work is basically asking yourself really hard questions to dive deep into your subconscious and start to heal your trauma. It's kind of that self-help approach. And I've found that it really, really helps me because we don't ask ourselves little things. Like one that was really hard for me was like, it was right about a really happy, proud moment in your childhood. And I'm like, wow, I don't really sit and think about like one specific impactful happy moment of my childhood and actually write about it in detail. Because then when you do that, especially when it comes to childhood stuff and working with your inner child, you're pulling so much out of your subconscious and it brings so much to the surface. So then you can start healing, because really spirituality is all about healing your mind, your body, your soul. So you could really incorporate it into like your fitness and mental health journal, start doing some gratitude journaling. My favorite one, which actually I have, maybe I don't, it's right in front of me. So silly. My favorite one is this one. It's the 5-minute journal.
Okay.
And this is a really great journal to get you started. It just has prompts.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's awesome. Literally takes 5 minutes and it gets you started on that gratitude journaling. So it has like a day and then a night section. And you do it the first 5 minutes of your day, last 5 minutes of your night. And
that's
it's awesome.
Great. Because there's so many, like my journals are blank. So everything, my format, I kind of played around with, but for people who are scared to get started, I don't know where to start. Something like that is perfect.
Yes, it's amazing. That's kind of how I got started. When my old roommate actually bought me that journal, and it really helped me. I also look up a lot of journal prompts. I post a lot of journal prompts all the time. I'm really like prompt based, because sometimes you feel like you know what you want to write about, but you just don't know how to ask yourself the questions. So that's where I really like journal prompts. And it really kind of guides you. And then I find that as you start writing, you're just flowing out onto the paper. And then all of a sudden you're looking back and being like, wow, that was a really great conversation with myself that I just had. So yeah.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me. And something I kind of want to bring up that you talked about in the podcast that I think is kind of important and kind of ties into that too. From your podcast and also just being around you, you're a very like specific person. Like when you were talking about your goals for your company, and you weren't just like, oh, I want to do, it's not like open-ended and broad, like, oh, I want to do well, I want to support myself, I want to pay the bills. It's no, I want to hit, you're giving yourself like real numbers to hit. I want to have this many listeners. I want to make this amount of money from my business. So kind of talk about the importance of being very specific and also leaving it open-ended. Like, I want to hit this, but we really hope that we kind of blow this out of the water. Like, this is a minimum, like this is the floor, and the ceiling, it does not exist.
Yeah, exactly. So that really like ties into a lot of manifesting. And that's a really fun thing to look back on as well, kind of like how you were talking about the Matthew McConaughey example. I really love journaling and manifesting and incorporating that into my journaling to look back on what goals I was writing about, 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. And then I can look back and maybe today I forgot what I wrote down like this time last year. And then I look back and I'm like, oh my God, like I've already done so much of that. And it's such a great, powerful moment. And it really puts a lot into perspective that if we physically write down the things that we want and get really specific about it, and we put the inspired action behind it, you can literally do anything. You can do anything. And you can make all your like manifestations come true as long as you like truly believe that it will happen.
For sure. And when you work hard, it may not, because, you're living the day to day, right? Same with, it's a great kind of comparison, analogy to fitness. The people who notice your transformation, if you lose a bunch of weight or you gain muscle, whatever you do, like you're not going to notice as much because you see it every day. But the people that you haven't seen in 6 months, they're like, whoa, like, oh my gosh, like what have you done? The same thing. You're living your life each day. But when you look back a year ago, you're like, it didn't feel like I did that much. But when I look back on it, I did this and I did that. And all of a sudden after a year, things kind of add up. And you're like, wow, I really kind of accomplished a lot of things in this past year. Now, again, you kind of got to put your head down and go to work. They aren't just going to happen. But if you work hard and you stick with it, you meditate, you manifest all of that stuff, whatever your process is, you can really do some impressive stuff. Even so in the moment, it may not feel like, it's like, sometimes you're like, oh, I haven't done anything. It's like, no, let's look back a year ago. It's like, oh no, wait, I have done stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so powerful too, just to have that gratitude for your past self as well. Just kind of like, oh, like, look at her. She had such big dreams. And like, me a year ago would be so proud of me today. Like I always, whenever I'm in a funk and just feeling really bad about myself, the imposter syndrome is just hitting hard.
Yeah.
I just look back on like my journals and whatever I was manifesting. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, me a year ago, she would be floored. She would be so proud of me today. Like, and it's a great way to pull yourself out of that mindset.
100%. I love it. Now, let's talk about this. Now, everyone should go listen to this episode. This is the episode I haven't gotten to yet. So everyone go listen to this because you tell the whole story. New York Fashion Week.
Yes.
You walk at New York Fashion Week. No experience. I'm giving you the floor. Take the mic. How did you pull this off? How did you make this happen?
Yeah, it's really, really crazy. So also the cool, fun, spiritual, crazy thing that happened was this all happened on 11/11, like 11/11 in November.
Whoa. And then your first podcast.
It launched on 2/22.
2/22/22. Epic.
Yep.
Numbers.
Yep.
How about that?
Yeah, very magical. So yeah, basically one of my old friends from high school, we've just kept in touch. It's kind of like small town things. Like everybody who has like gotten out of our small town has just kept in touch with one another. Like, hey,
chat.
wow. Yeah.
There's a Facebook group.
Yeah. There's
everyone who left. Where are you from?
McHenry. Yeah.
McHenry. I was going to say Naperville. Or Crystal Lake. Those are the only two suburbs I know of Chicago.
Yeah. I mean, Crystal Lake's right next door. So
well, right there. Close enough. Yeah.
But yeah, so we've just kept in touch over the years. And I knew that he was living in LA and he was a designer, and he DM'd me and he was like, hey Syd, like I really see you fitting the vision for my brand. Like we just got invited to our very first New York Fashion Week and I think that you would fit it really well. Let me know if you're down. And at first, me being me, I'm like, oh, he just wants me to come watch the show. I'm like, yeah, I'll fly to New York to watch your fashion show. Why not? Like, and so I'm like, yes, like down. That's awesome. So proud of you. And then he's like, okay, so the models are going to be staying in this Airbnb and then you're going to be wearing this kind of outfit and telling me all these things. And I'm like, oh, he wants me in the show.
Yeah.
Like, he wants me on the runway.
What is this fucking play about us?
Literally, is this fucking play about us?
Wait, is this fucking play about us?
Literally. And so, yeah, then from there, the conversation just kept going, kept in touch leading up to February. Also, the other amazing magical thing, the price of my flight to New York was $222.
Come on.
Like, how could you ignore all those signs? Like, oh, and people say spirituality is whatever, whatever. Let them talk. But so big fan of angel numbers, big fan.
Amazing.
Anyways, but yeah, so then it happened. I flew to New York and I was absolutely terrified. I can actually be very shy and introverted at times. And so walking into a shared Airbnb with all of these strangers, half of them are all other models. And the only person I know is my friend from high school who I haven't seen in person in about almost 10 years.
Oh my
gosh. I
I
was terrified, but everybody was so nice. It was so much fun. We all just became like besties and it was an amazing, magical weekend. I did not fall on the runway. I killed it. I absolutely killed it.
Pictures look great.
Yes, thank you. It was an experience of a lifetime. It was insane.
So,
shout out Josh.
when you were getting ready to walk out for the first time, just take me behind the scenes. Like what's going through your head? Were you about to, you were like, I need to throw up. I can't throw up. My throat, my heart's in my throat. Like, what was that like?
Yeah, my heart was literally beating out of my chest. I was terrified. So it was like classic what you would expect. Like there was like a curtain and then it was like the runway. And so Josh, my friend, the designer, he was like standing at like the front, opening the curtain and giving everybody their cues. And so I'm just like watching each person in front of me go out. I'm like, oh my God, it's getting closer and closer to me. I'm like, fuck, 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 fuck. And it was insane. It was like he pulled the curtain, gave me my cue, and all of a sudden, all of that went away. It was like a light switch. I was like, boom, show's on. We're going. And I just like walked out there as if I've been doing it for years. And it was such an adrenaline rush and such a beautiful high that like once I got off the runway, I was shaking. I was like, oh my God, I want to go do that again. Can we go again?
Yes. Wow. Now, had you done any practice runs? Have you ever walked down a runway before? It was literally your first walk down a runway during the real thing during New York Fashion Week.
Yeah, that was my very first time ever. We practiced, of course, like we did some rehearsals like the day of with the whole team, all the other models, but that was my very first runway show ever, New York Fashion Week.
Wow, not bad. I'm gonna,
bad.
Don't know a ton, but I'm gonna say that's not bad. I'm gonna go ahead and lock that answer in.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap up with this. Your company. Now, you worked for some other companies. One of the OG interns at Mayfair Group. I mean, you've been doing this whole kind of also. I mean, you also do a ton of social media stuff, but also you've kind of worked on the business end of it. With influencers and companies. So you talk about it in your podcast, but kind of, did you always want to like branch off and do your own thing? Just weren't sure how to do it, maybe a little bit scared to do it, or did you kind of have this moment where you're like, okay, I'm kind of out of work right now, I don't really know what to do, and it just kind of hit you? It's like, wait, no, I know how to do this. I can just do my own thing and create my own business.
Yeah, it exactly that kind of. So I was furloughed from my job in like the midst of COVID in 2020.
Right.
And then like took a few months. I was just kind of on unemployment, just floating, wasn't really sure like what I wanted to do. And then eventually, I think it was like November, I was like, what am I doing? I can literally do this. I'm like, I know how to do this. I just need to learn like business end of things. And I was like, I can do this by myself and make so much more money.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's basically exactly what I did.
I love it. Sometimes you got to call your own shots.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
I love it. Well, Sydney, man, this flew by. I feel like we got so much info in such a short amount of time. I think we were fired up, so we were talking fast. So I love it. I love it. Well, thank you all so much for watching. Do not forget to subscribe. New and exciting episodes out for this podcast every single Monday. And don't forget to check out Sydney's podcast, Elevate Your Dream State, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, down in the link below. What days do they come out? You got a day?
Tuesdays.
Look for them on Tuesdays, and you can binge it right now. You have 3 episodes to go listen to, so go do that. Thank you to Sydney, and thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you next Monday.